Chapter 4:15. In the face of such a request, you couldn't say that they were too much, but they still didn't know what was good for them. Qiao Weiyuan's face darkened, and he didn't say a word. He had never been threatened like this before. Dongfang Cheng Ao asked expressionlessly, "How many people do you have?" "Tell me, and I'll try replying to the Cultivation Alliance, 632 people. As long as we get the money, we promise we'll rush over immediately. Don't worry, we'll do what we say." "Okay." Dongfang Cheng Ao agreed without hesitation. The two of them returned and once again conveyed the loose cultivator's request. Although the sects were furious when they heard the news, it was worth it to be able to poach all of Yu Qianzhou's subordinates and turn him into a loner. Therefore, they ordered the people in the 100 Flowers Valley to raise the money and give it to Dongfang Cheng Ao and Qiao Weiyuan. The sects didn't believe that these people would run away with the money and harm the interests of the sections. Although 600 people in the early stage of tribulation passing were powerful, they couldn't withstand the anger of the entire Chinese cultivation world. In the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance, Qiao Weiyuan held the storage bag in his hand and snorted, "Now that the spirit stones are ready, let's see what else they can do, unless they want to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance." Dongfang Cheng Ao frowned slightly. Yu Qianzhou had been too calm for the past 2 days, as if this had nothing to do with him at all. Could he really hand over these people so easily? "Did you notice something wrong with Yu Qianzhou?" Dongfang Cheng Ao asked. "Yes. This kid never does things that are disadvantageous to him." "I'm a little uncertain now," Qiao Weiyuan said suspiciously. "There must be something strange when something is out of the ordinary." Dongfang Cheng Ao pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Forget it. The Cultivation Alliance is in the wrong in this matter. We just need to do our duty as a messenger." Sigh. "Let's go again." The two of them walked out of the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance and saw that the shops of the various sects were hung with white soul-summoning banners. Many people were wearing sackcloth. Tonight, there would be a memorial ceremony. Naturally, it was to mourn the dead disciples of the various sections. Upon seeing this, both of their hearts sank. Many disciples from supporting Immortals Island and 10,000 demons had also died. When they passed by the 100 Flowers house, Yu Qianzhou was holding a cup of tea and chatting with the 100 Charms enchantress. When he saw the two of them passing by, he waved his hand in a friendly manner, and the two of them nodded slightly in response. After watching the two of them leave the 100 Flowers Valley, the allure temptress turned around and smiled. "Little fox, what are you up to this time? Can you tell me a little?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head innocently and sighed, "I'm obviously living a peaceful life here. Why do you think I'm up to no good?" Sigh. "My heart was originally directed to the bright moon, but the bright moon shines on the ditch." "Oh. Then I'll wait and see. I hope there won't be a day where I reveal my fox tail." The allure temptress giggled. Ze, who was at the side, sadly realized that she was a little unnecessary here. Outside the 100 Flowers Valley, Qiao Weiyuan frowned and said, "I'm a little curious. That allure temptress has been in hiding for so many years. How did she end up with Yu Qianzhou? You can go and ask her. See if you can find out the reason." Dongfang Cheng Ao said and flew towards the place where the wandering cultivators were hiding. Qiao Weiyuan glared at him and followed. Ever since the battle, the two of them had become much more harmonious. They were still in the hidden and dark valley. The two of them looked around at the dark and damp environment. They really had to hand it to these people. They could actually hide here every day without moving. After the disgusting cut secret signal, the few people appeared again. Dongfang Cheng Ao threw the storage bag in his hand to the leader of the wandering cultivators and said, 63,200,000 upper-grade spiritual stones, not a single one less. You guys take a look." The leader nodded and said, "All right. Tomorrow morning, we'll gather outside the 100 Flowers Valley and immediately head to the coast of the East Sea." Dongfang Cheng Ao and Qiao Weiyuan looked at each other. Obviously, they did not expect the other party to agree so easily. Qiu Wuyuan said in a deep voice, I've given you the spiritual stones. I hope you guys can keep your promise. I don't want 632 people to be missing. Don't worry, Elder Qiu. Tomorrow, you'll see that all 632 wandering cultivators who showed up outside the Hundred Flowers Palace will appear outside the Hundred Flowers Valley for you to count. We won't go back on our words. The leader of the wandering cultivators promised in a powerful voice. That's great. But I hope you guys remember not to run away with the money. Yu Qianqiu won't be able to bear the consequences. Qiu Wuyuan warned. The meaning of his words was clear. We have already determined that you guys are Yu Qianqiu's people. If you run away, the Cultivation Alliance will not look for you. They will look for Yu Qianqiu to settle the score. He suspected that the most likely thing these people would do was to take off their masks and run away. These people were obviously not the wandering cultivators from before. No one knew them. If they ran away, it would be really hard to find them. Thank you for your advice, Elder Qiu. See you tomorrow. The leader of the wandering cultivators sneered and waved his hand. The few of them went back into the darkness. It was night and the moon was bright. The market in the Hundred Flowers Valley that was originally bright all night was closed. The center of the square that had been cleared out was piled with firewood, burning it to the sky. People from various sects gathered in circles and sat cross-legged. Many of them held a piece of wooden board in their hands and wrote the names of their dead disciples on it. Then, people from various sects threw these wooden boards into the raging fire. This was a unique ceremony in the Chinese cultivation world. There were no complicated ceremonies and no one spoke. It was very quiet. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of the burning fire and the crackling of the wood. As the wooden boards with names written on them were thrown into the fire, the dead disciples were completely cut off from this world. Tonight, the people from the various sects would silently sit here for the entire night, mourning the deaths of their fellow sect members. The Allure Beauty came upstairs with wine and food. She looked around the room and found that Yu Qianqiu was no longer in the room. Only Ze was leaning on the window, looking at the square where the ceremony was held. Looking at her, she seemed to be curious about this kind of ceremony. Miss Ze, where did Yu Qianqiu go? The Allure Beauty walked over and asked. Ze raised her hand and pointed to the opposite roof, saying, There. The Allure Beauty looked out of the window and looked in the direction of her finger. She saw Yu Qianqiu standing on the opposite roof with his hands behind his back. He was in a daze under the bright moon. No one knew what he was thinking about. Let's go up too. The Allure Beauty looked at the dishes in her hands and said. Ze nodded and took the lead to go up the opposite roof. The Allure Beauty held the things in her hands and floated up. When the two of them came, Yu Qianqiu looked back slightly and was a little indifferent. He turned his head and looked at the raging fire in the square. The two of them didn't disturb him. The Allure Beauty gave Ze a look and passed the tray in her hands to her. Then, she turned around and flashed back into the opposite house. The two of them had been together for a few days and were gradually able to accommodate each other. After a while, the Allure Beauty came back with a short table on the couch. She bent down and set it up on the roof. Then, she made a gesture to Ze. Ze's eyes lit up and understood the Allure Beauty's meaning. The two of them quickly took out the dishes and placed them on the short table. The Allure Beauty poured a cup of wine and walked to Yu Qianqiu's side. She smiled and said, Why are you so focused? What are you thinking? Ze looked at the two of them and looked at the big moon above her head. She picked up her chopsticks and ate happily. It seemed like it was the first time she ate under the moon. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and said, Think about how many people will remember them after they die. If I, Yu Qianqiu, become like them one day, how many people will remember me, Yu Qianqiu? As soon as he said that, a few old turtles flew past under the bright moon, leaving behind a few ear-piercing screeches. In the present age, the old turtle was regarded as an inauspicious symbol. Coincidentally, it appeared when Yu Qianqiu said those words. The Allure Enchantress raised her head and took a look. Her expression changed slightly as she pouted, What nonsense are you talking about? Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and took the cup from her hand. As soon as he put it to his lips, he suddenly paused. The allure beauty followed his gaze and saw that Bai Hua Fairy had personally led Bai Hua Palace's disciples to the square, blocking the gap formed by the sect's encirclement. I heard that the 600 or so loose cultivators have really accepted the Cultivation Alliance's decree and will be heading to the Eastern Sea tomorrow. If Yan Bugui brings people to forcefully welcome Guan Muxue and her daughter, who can stop them with just the people here? The allure beauty looked away and said worriedly. Don't worry, they've suffered a great loss this time, so they won't come back for a while. Even if Yan Bugui wants to come, those foreign cultivators won't risk the lives of their disciples for his own selfish reasons. After all, it's enough to scare them for a while. Under such a situation, Yan Bugui would not dare to act rashly. Yu Qianqiu smiled confidently as he drained the wine in his cup in one gulp. It was as if he was passing judgment on the world. The allure beauty looked at him and was a bit surprised. A complicated look flashed through her eyes. She took the cup from his hand and said, "You've really calculated everything, but I don't believe that you'll really give those people to the Cultivation Alliance for nothing." Yu Qianqiu smiled noncommittally. This woman always talked about this topic after a few sentences. He changed the topic and said, "Palace Lord Yi, after the defeat of the Magical Illusion Palace, did you also hold such a memorial ceremony for the disciples who died in the battle?" Hearing this, the complexion of the allure beauty changed. She could no longer smile. With a somewhat absent-minded expression, she cast her gaze towards the raging flames on the square. She softly sighed, bowed, and placed the wine cup in her hand on the short table. Sitting cross-legged on the roof, she took out a zither from her storage bag and began to play it. The melancholy in the music was hard to suppress. The sudden sound of the zither attracted the attention of everyone in the square. Seeing that it was the three of them, they silently looked away and continued to meditate. On the other hand, Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter's gazes lingered on Yu Qianqiu for a bit. Purple Dress bit her chopsticks, looked at the allure beauty for a bit, then continued to eat her food. After getting rid of the allure beauty's question, Yu Qianqiu looked at the white banners in the square, thinking about the 600 subordinates who would set off tomorrow. He didn't know what would happen to them, so he couldn't help but feel a bit down. Thinking about the Utopia Alliance's army of almost 10,000 ready to go, his fighting spirit rose again. Listening to the allure beauty's melancholy music, he suddenly felt a sense of pride to compete against fate. He turned around and picked up the wine pot and cup, poured himself a cup, then another. After thinking for a bit, he gave the cup to the moon and shook his head. Circulating his true essence, he suppressed the zither music and slowly recited, singing to wine, "How long is life? Like the morning dew, the days past are bitter. Generous, unforgettable. Only Du Kong can solve my worries. Indigo collar, my heart is long. But for my lord, I have pondered until now." Every word was sent out clearly in the square, and everyone looked over in surprise. The recitation and melancholy music were supposed to be incompatible, but it produced another kind of beauty. They complemented each other, and it was extremely wonderful. The allure beauty stopped playing in shock and looked at him in a daze. This man gave her a feeling that he was becoming more and more unfathomable. He usually looked like he wasn't serious, but he was actually very astute. It was already surprising that he could play the zither and compose music, but in the blink of an eye, he could come up with such wonderful lyrics. It had to be said that he was a serious talent. Even if a talent like him wasn't in the cultivation world, he would definitely be famous in the secular world. Purple Dress stuck her chopsticks in her mouth again, staring at him with wide eyes. She also realized that she couldn't see through him anymore. The people below could not help but think, singing to wine, "How long is there? Like the morning dew, the days past are bitter. Generous, unforgettable. Only Du Kong can solve my worries. But for my lord, my heart is long. But for my lord, I have pondered until now." After thinking about it, they all looked at Yu Qianqiu with a lot of emotions. From the words itself, it seems like he was lamenting about life, thinking about someone. This was a perfect eulogy. Bai Hua Fairy stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was drinking to the moon on the rooftop, and nodded slightly, then turned to look at her daughter. Seeing that she was a bit lost, she silently closed her eyes. As the music stopped, Yu Qianqiu also realized that his emotions were a bit messy, so he drank the rest of the wine in his cup and returned to Hundred Flowers' house. The next day, Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan arrived at the Hundred Flowers Valley early in the morning to wait. When the sun rose, the masked rogue cultivators really did come, gathering in front of the two of them from all directions. The leader walked over and clasped his fist. "We are ready, please give us the pass." As it was the time of the war, every sect had sent people to search for suspicious cultivators. Without the pass of the Cultivation Alliance, it would be a bit troublesome. There might even be a misunderstanding. Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan checked and nodded. Sure enough, they were all tribulation-passing realm early-stage cultivators. No one messed around. But then the two of them frowned. Qiu Weiyuan shouted, "You took 63. 2 million high-grade spirit stones. There should be 632 people. Why are you still missing 2? Elder Qiu, no need to rush. We are true to our words. The other 2 should be here soon. Just wait for a bit," the leader said. Just as Qiu Weiyuan snorted, someone shouted, they're coming, ah. I almost overslept." The voice was so familiar. Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan's expression changed at the same time. Yu Qianqiu smiled and clasped his fist at the two of them, then turned to the group of rogue cultivators. "Are you ready? I just borrowed 10 large flying mystic instruments from the shops of the 4 major families. It should be enough to send us there." Dongfang Cheng, Ao frowned. Qiu Weiyuan said in a deep voice, "Yu Qianqiu, why are you here again?" "Ha!" Yu Qianqiu turned around and said, "Ze and I are both rogue cultivators, and we each received 100,000 high-grade spirit stones yesterday. Naturally, we have to go to the coast of East Sea to participate in the war according to the agreement between you and the rogue cultivators." Beauty of 100 Charms was surprised. "Yu Qianqiu, you and Ze are going to the coast of East Sea too? What about me?" Yu Qianqiu snickered. "You're not a rogue cultivator, and you didn't get any money. Of course you have to stay here." He didn't tell her, although he was afraid that the secret would be leaked, and he also wanted to find a reason to dump her. With her around, there were many things that he couldn't do freely. In fact, he also didn't tell Ze, but she definitely wouldn't doubt his decision. "You want to dump me and leave me here alone?" the 100 Charm enchantress shouted in a delicate voice. Dongfang Cheng, Ao frowned. "Yu Qianqiu, the Cultivation Alliance didn't send you a decree. Why are you going there?" "That's not right. The Cultivation Alliance allocated 63,200,000 high-grade spirit stones, including me and Ze. There were 632 rogue cultivators outside the 100-flower palace." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the masked rogue cultivators. "Although they didn't ask for my name, they didn't ask for theirs either. But they already gave me the money. Isn't it asking me to go too? Do they want me and Ze to wear masked clothes too? That's fine, luckily I have a few more here." As he spoke, he really took out 2 masked clothes with the word Rogue Cultivator embroidered on them from his storage bag, threw one to Ze, and put it on in front of everyone. Ze looked at him with the clothes, and put on the masked clothes too. After the two of them put on, they immediately stood among the rogue cultivators. The leader of the masked rogue cultivators stretched out his hand and said, 632 rogue cultivators are here. Elders, please give us the pass so we can report to the Cultivation Alliance as soon as possible." Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan looked at each other. So Yu Qianqiu was waiting for them here. Just think about it, all the sects treated Yu Qianqiu as the representative of the rogue cultivators, but they didn't expect him to be a rogue cultivator too. In fact, let alone the sects, the two of them also neglected this point. This was bad. No one told these rogue cultivators that once they arrived at the coast of East Sea, they would be separated into different sections. They were going to be divided according to the method of distributing tasks after they arrived. If Yu Qianqiu brought them there, who among the sects would be able to poach them from his hands? This guy could beat or scold them at any time, not to mention he brought so many loyal subordinates with him. He was even less afraid of anyone. It's over, all the sects were cheated of more than 60 million by him for nothing. Yu Qianqiu, what are you trying to do? Qiu Wuyuan shouted with a livid face. What am I trying to do? Yu Qianqiu sneered, took off his mask, and said coldly, of course I'm following the decree of the Cultivation Alliance, going to the coast of East Sea to participate in the battle. Why? Did I say something wrong? You. Qiu Wuyuan was so angry that he couldn't speak. If he really sent this guy over, the various sects would not be able to poach him and lose a large sum of money. It would be strange if they didn't settle the score with him and Dongfang Chang Ao later. Chapter 4:16. What's wrong with me? Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, everyone knows that I'm a man of my word. Since I've already accepted the money, I will never go back on my word. I will never be a villain who goes back on his word. As for this, you can rest assured. Even if we don't have the token, we will still barge our way through. We will not be intimidated by any obstacles. His words were clearly a threat. His meaning was clear. If you don't give me the token, don't blame me for not warning you in advance if you run into any sects checking on us on the way and something unexpected happens. Qiu Wuyuan was so angry that he laughed and said, you're a man of your word? I wonder who would believe you. It seems like you've always been the one praising yourself. Whether you're a man of your word or not, it's not up to you to decide. It's up to others to judge you. F***ck. How dare you doubt my character? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and said, the world has many misunderstandings about me. If I don't say it out loud, who would know that I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word? You're twisting words and forcing logic. Qiu Wuyuan was about to refute him when Dongfang Changyao waved an arm in front of him, stopping him from speaking any further. With his other hand, he took out a jade archive and tossed it to Yu Qianqiu, saying, the token is here. Hurry up and report back. Qiu Wuyuan was taken aback. He looked at Dongfang Changyao in confusion, but the latter shook his head slightly. Yu Qianqiu caught the jade archive and tossed it to the masked rogue cultivator behind him. He glanced at the two of them and spat, damn it. I didn't expect to save an ingrate. If I had known this would happen, I would have just let Yan Bugui and the others kill him. Why would I want to interfere in this matter? I'll be at ease if they're all dead. It'll save me some trouble. Dongfang Chang Ao and Qiu Wuyuan's expressions changed. Although the other party's words were harsh, he did save their lives. Compared to the debt of saving their lives, one or two harsh words were really nothing. Therefore, the two of them did not say anything else. Seeing that there was no response from the other party and that he had obtained the pass, Yu Qianqiu could not be bothered to argue anymore. He took out a bunch of flying artifacts from his storage bag and distributed them to the masked loose cultivator. He kept 6 of them and kept the rest back. He said that he borrowed 10 of the best flying artifacts from the shops of the 4 great clans, but in fact, he spent a lot of money to make these 10 flying artifacts. Of course, when he said that he had spent a lot of money, he had used a lot of rare materials of his own, not a lot of spirit stones. Naturally, the cost of making it was completely free. The 4 great clans were too embarrassed to accept his money. However, they did obtain a lot of good materials during the making process. Long before the saber drawing assembly, he had a secret discussion with the head of the Jing clan, who specialized in making flying artifacts. Jing Feihong had agreed to help him make 10 flying artifacts that could carry 10,000 people at the same time, using the most secretive techniques from the Jing clan. Each artifact had to be able to carry at least 1,000 people. Even so, Yu Qianqiu's requirements were extremely strict. He wanted these 10 flying artifacts to not only have the best techniques, but also to be made of the most durable materials. Especially the outer shell, it had to be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. At the very least, it had to be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Jing Feihong was shocked to hear this. It was reasonable to use the most durable materials, but why did they need to make the shell so sturdy? Flying artifacts were used to carry people. Who would use a flying artifact to fight an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage? Jing Feihong thought about it, shook his head, and smiled bitterly. He said, perhaps we can find some rare materials to make a small flying artifact. However, where can we find so many good materials to make 10 such large flying artifacts? Moreover, they have to be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. The Jing clan is really helpless. You don't have to worry about this. I will provide the materials. What do you think of using this to make them? Yu Qianqiu said as he secretly stuffed something into Jing Feihong's hands. Jing Feihong took a look at it and was instantly shocked. He said, nether iron. The Jing clan was good at making artifacts, so they were naturally better at identifying these things. They immediately recognized what it was. It was actually the world's rare nether iron. If you use nether iron to make them, they should be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, right? Yu Qianqiu asked this because he wasn't too sure. He had never fought with an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage because he knew that the final stage and the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage were two completely different concepts. He had never dared to try fighting someone like that. Being beaten up was a small matter. At worst, he could just get back up after falling down. The important thing was that big boss you couldn't afford to lose face like that. Absolutely no problem, unless the other party has some powerful artifact. Jing Feihong held the item in his hands and nodded as he looked at it. Then, he asked suspiciously, even if we use nether iron to make them, the materials needed to make 10 ships are not something that can be easily obtained. Mister, how can you find so much nether iron? You don't have to worry about this. Just tell me how much you need. Yu Qianqiu patted his chest confidently. This. Jing Feihong thought for a while and said, the amount of nether iron needed to make 10 ships, based on the storage bags in 3 rooms, would be at least 8 bags. That much? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Jing Feihong nodded and said, if we use all of them with nether iron and add on the other things that we need, 8 bags would barely be enough. If we only need to use some in the crucial areas, 1 bag would be enough. Forget it. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and gritted his teeth. You don't have to worry about the materials. I'll gather 10 bags for you as soon as possible. Use all of them with nether iron. They have to be sturdy and durable. Jing Feihong watched him leave, dumbfounded. He didn't know if he would really be able to get 10 bags of nether iron. Without another word, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia on the same day. Back when he was digging the tunnels in the Hades cave, he had collected quite a lot of nether iron. Putting them all together, there were barely 3 bags. Chen Feng had even cried and begged him to keep at least half of them. He said that once he figured out a way to refine nether iron, he would let the entire Utopia army use nether iron artifacts. Originally, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to keep them, but after hearing what Chen Feng said, he was tempted. He had no choice but to make another trip to the Hades cave. He spent close to a day digging out a large tumor in the intestine-like Hades cave before finally getting 10 bags. The next day, when he really handed the 10 bags of nether iron to Jing Feihong gulped hard. He couldn't believe that this was real. After coming back to his senses, he immediately promised, I'll definitely create those 10 artifacts as soon as possible. Yu Qianqiu recalled that Chen Feng had said that refining nether iron was very troublesome, so he asked Jing Feihong, it might be more troublesome to refine nether iron. Does your Jing family have a way? Mister, you don't have to worry about this. My Jing family relies on refining artifacts, so we naturally have a set of secret refining techniques that won't be leaked, Jing Feihong said confidently. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he immediately became interested. He asked, what secret technique? Can you give me a set of recipes so that I can broaden my horizons? This. Jing Feihong said hesitantly, this is the Jing family's foundation. The secret refining technique has always been kept by the Elders Guild. If you want to take it out, you have to get the Elders Guild's approval. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to take it out in a short period of time. Don't worry, I'm just asking casually, Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. In his heart, however, he was thinking that he would get it sooner or later, so he couldn't push them too hard. He had to wait for them to finish the 10 flying artifacts first. Just like that, Yu Qianqiu waited for news of the Jing family's flying artifacts. The day before yesterday, someone from the Jing family's shop came to say that the artifacts would be quietly delivered to the 100 Flowers Valley the next night. So the next day, after the masked loose cultivator received the spirit stones from Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Wuyuan, he delayed his departure to the next day. The reason was that Yu Qianqiu wanted to wait until he got the artifacts before he left. A flying artifact could carry 1,000 people, so it was more than enough to carry 600 people. But after all, it was the first test. For the sake of speed and safety, Yu Qianqiu decided to scatter the 600 people. First, the smaller the size of the flying artifact, the faster it could fly. Second, if there was an accident, they wouldn't be killed all at once. On the surface, they were masked loose cultivators, but in reality, they were the 6 captains of the special forces. They threw the artifacts in their hands at the same time, and in the blink of an eye, 6 black flying artifacts with 2 sharp ends and round waists appeared in the sky. 2 pairs of legs stretched out from the bottom, and the 6 artifacts landed on the ground side by side. When the sun rose, it was supposed to be the time for everything to wake up and be full of life. But when these 6 enormous objects appeared, they immediately made everyone feel an inexplicable pressure. Their bodies were as black as ink, with 2 sharp ends. It was hard to tell which side was the head and which was the tail. The smooth, streamlined design made people's hearts palpitate under the sun's touch. It made everyone feel like they were facing 6 monsters. Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Wuyuan looked at each other. They knew that this was a flying artifact, but they had never seen such a flying artifact before. It was a little strange. The Allure Beauty looked at Purple Dress and saw that she was also curious. Clearly, she had never seen it before. The loose cultivators were also sizing them up. In the end, their gazes focused on the abdomen of a few flying artifacts. They saw that there were words and strange symbols like Utopia 001 engraved on them. Everyone knew the words Utopia at the front, but they had never seen the symbols at the back. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin, and his eyebrows twitched. He seemed to be a little proud. These artifacts had abandoned the flashy designs of dragons and beasts, and only chose a single streamlined design. It looked simple, but in fact, it was a combination of some of the design concepts he knew from his previous life. The streamlined design could reduce wind resistance, and only then could the flight speed be maximized. There was no point in having messy designs and engravings. The key was that it was practical. From Utopia 001 to Utopia 010, there were a total of 10 flying artifacts, and they were all named after Utopia. The one in front of him was 6 of them, and the remaining one was the one he had just put into his storage bag. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands together excitedly. He couldn't wait to try out the flying magic tool that had integrated the advanced concepts of his past life. In any case, he couldn't return to his past life, so he could only sit on this thing to reminisce. Chapter 4:17. Beside him, the temptress suddenly pulled him back. She glared at him and asked, "Are you really going to leave me here by myself?" "About that." Yu Qianqiu chuckled, "You're not a loose cultivator, and you didn't take any money either. Why do you have to join in the fun?" As he said that, he turned to the 2 team leaders and the 6 company commanders and said, "Follow me." The 8 of them followed Yu Qianqiu towards a flying transcendent artifact. Ziyi's eyes brightened, and she followed without hesitation. The temptress was taken aback. Suddenly, she giggled and said, "So what if I didn't take any money?" "I don't want it." She smiled coquettishly and followed after them. Yu Qianqiu stomped his feet and turned around. He was speechless. He had never met such a thick-skinned woman before. He then led the group onto the flying transcendent artifact. Everyone looked around. The interior was decorated with many fluorescent stones for illumination. Although it was empty, the tiles were brand new. Clearly, they were new. Yu Qianqiu took out a jade archive and examined it. He then smiled and walked to one end. He stomped on a square beneath his feet, and immediately, they heard the buzzing sound of a spring turning from the bottom. Everyone's eyes suddenly lit up. The shields on their left, right, front, and top were retracted with a whoosh. 8 transparent crystal windows appeared before everyone's eyes, allowing them to see the scenery outside. Outside, Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Wuyuan were startled by the movement of this strange object. Why did it suddenly grow eyes? They then saw Yu Qianqiu and the others standing in front of the transparent crystal at the front of the cone, gesturing to the outside world. These 8 windows allow the user of the flying transcendent artifact to observe the situation outside. They don't have to be exposed to the elements outside. If something unexpected happens, they can close the windows at any time. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the circle of transparent crystal windows as he introduced them. He then stomped on the square beneath his feet. Everyone's vision darkened, and the 8 windows were sealed again. She stepped on it again, and the window opened again. While everyone was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu stepped on the other squares under his feet. The sound of springs rang out, and a wide and thick seat rose up behind his buttocks. He sat down calmly and pointed at the platform in front of him that was filled with spirit stones. He smiled and said, "This is the place to replenish the spirit stones. The pilot can sit here and easily control the entire flying mystic instrument." Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Yu Qianqiu stood up and put away all these things before entering the spacious cabin. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw that on the cabin floor, there was a square every 2 meters. It was obvious that there was something special about it. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu walked to the side and stomped on it. Another thick chair rose up. He sat down and touched the small hand valve on the side of his body. The back of the chair could be adjusted very comfortably. Everyone was speechless as they watched. He then pulled down one of the hand valves on the cabin wall, and a small transparent window appeared before everyone's eyes. After Yu Qianqiu closed it again, he stood up and said with a smile, "Those sitting on the side can observe the situation outside through this window." After demonstrating once, he quickly made 8 copies of the Jade Archive in his hand and handed them to the 2 team leaders and the 6 company commanders. He said, "I've done it once. You should understand the gist of it by now. Some of the control methods in here are more or less the same. Just take a look and you'll understand." As he spoke, he suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Each of the 6 companies will have 1 flying transcendent artifact. The 2 team leaders will each be responsible for 3. Keep in touch with each other. Once we're airborne, immediately discuss and form a battle formation. The target is the coast of the Eastern Sea. Execute the order immediately." As soon as they received the order, the 8 of them immediately perked up and responded in unison, "Yes." Then, they quickly exited the mysterious flying transcendent artifact. Ze and the Temptress were so shocked that they felt like they were dreaming. They saw Yu Qianqiu walk to the rear cabin with his hands behind his back and pull open a door. He then walked in while shaking his head. "Is there something new in there?" The 2 girls looked at each other and quickly followed him in. Inside the small space, there was a large bed and a recliner. Yu Qianqiu activated a mechanism, and a large protective shell suddenly appeared above his head, letting in the bright sunlight. Then, they saw him leisurely leaning against the recliner, squinting his eyes as he basked in the sun. He looked very relaxed. "There's a bed and recliner on the flying transcendent artifact?" The 2 girls looked at the small space in a daze. Suddenly, the flying transcendent artifact shook. The Temptress blinked her eyes and quickly walked to the transparent crystal window. The 6 flying transcendent artifacts, including this one, slowly rose into the air and adjusted their direction. Below them, Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Wuyuan had seen many things in their lives, but they had never seen such a strange flying transcendent artifact. They watched as the 6 flying transcendent artifacts formed a formation in the air, with 1 in the lead and 2 on each side. The one Yu Qianqiu was on was sandwiched in the middle of the formation, becoming the center point of the formation. The 6 flying transcendent artifacts adjusted their direction and quickly flew towards the east. They could vaguely see Yu Qianqiu lying on a recliner and waving at them through the transparent window at the rear of the flying transcendent artifact in the middle. This kid has finally grown up. This is going to be difficult. Dongfang Chang Ao shook his head and smiled bitterly. He turned to the people beside him and said, "They came prepared. The coast of the East Sea is going to be lively." Qiu Wuyuan said with a solemn face, "We have to quickly spread the news and let the sects prepare." The two of them looked at each other and quickly flew into the 100 Flowers Valley. Ze and the Temptress were leaning against the transparent crystal window, chattering like 2 little girls. Their faces were filled with excitement, and they would occasionally point at the white clouds floating by outside as they chatted and laughed, as if they had never seen them before. Yu Qianqiu lazily turned over on the soft recliner and continued to sleep. The Temptress turned around and looked, then walked over with a smile. She squeezed her butt onto the recliner and poked a certain someone's waist with her sharp index finger. Yu Qianqiu let out a cry and sat up. He rubbed his waist and glared at her angrily. He shouted, "Are you done yet? What do you want?" The Temptress wasn't angry. She looked around and thought to herself, "Thank goodness I'm thick-skinned enough to come here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see such a flying instrument." Thinking of this, she winked at Yu Qianqiu seductively. Yu Qianqiu shuddered and immediately lost his temper. He wanted to move away from the Temptress, but the Temptress grabbed his hand and asked, "Let me ask you, was this flying instrument really made by the Jing clan of the 4 major clans? Are you trying to seduce me?" Yu Qianqiu struggled, but he couldn't get rid of the Temptress. He smiled bitterly and said, "Palace leader Yi, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't pull me, okay?" Ze turned around and glanced at the two of them. She was already used to their actions. She turned around and pressed her face against the transparent window. Her eyes were pure as she looked at the clouds of different shapes that were being thrown far away. The Allure Beauty glanced at Ze and bit her alluring red lips with her silver teeth. She grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu and whispered in his ear, "Don't call me Palace Lord Yi in the future. My real name is Yi Kun. You can just call me Yi Kun." Her voice was like a devil's voice, very alluring. "Call me Yi Kun? What a mess." Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He rejected the temptation and said, "Don't give me that. Don't you just want to know where this flying instrument came from?" The Temptress retracted her hand, blinked her eyes, and said in a tone that seemed both real and fake, "You even saw through this?" "That's right. I just want to know. With such a comfortable structure, my pink sect will also buy one." Yu Qianqiu escaped from the Temptress' hands. He turned around and sat on the bed. He waved his hand and said, "The Jing clan made it. You can buy it from them. I'm just afraid that you can't afford it." "How many spiritual stones do I need?" the Temptress asked. "Once you figure out what this flying magic artifact is made of, you won't ask anymore." Yu Qianqiu sneered. The Temptress didn't pester him anymore. She knocked around the cabin and thought about it. At the coast of the East Sea, in an uninhabited courtyard, people from different sects were sitting together again. After receiving the news from Dongfang Chang Ao and Qiu Wuyuan, they all looked at each other. A group of people wanted to poach Yu Qianqiu's people, but in the end, they were cheated by Yu Qianqiu. Bai Shan of the 4 major families sneered. Didn't he know what kind of person Yu Qianqiu was? Every time he saw something good, he would want to take a bite. Now, not only did he not get anything, but he also broke his teeth. "We can't let that brat have it." Zhu Xianxian of the Daluo sect suddenly shouted with a dark face. The group of people all had mocking expressions on their faces. It seemed like this guy was the one who came up with the idea. If Yu Qianqiu found out about it, who knew who would be the one to blame? However, they believed that it couldn't be kept a secret. Everyone looked at Bai Shan, who was smiling coldly. With the relationship between the 4 major families and Yu Qianqiu, it was possible that Yu Qianqiu already knew about it. Maybe Yu Qianqiu had personally led his people here to settle the score with the Daluo sect. After all, no matter how arrogant Yu Qianqiu was, he wouldn't go against the entire Chinese cultivation world. It was very likely that he would go after the Daluo sect. Seeing that everyone was silent, Zhu Xianxian looked around and said, "Does no one want to take back the spiritual stones that belong to your sect? Are we going to be cheated by him just like that?" Yuan Jiukui of the Six Paths Demon sect chuckled and said, "How? Snatch it or trick it? Do you think that we can force him to hand it over by issuing a decree in the name of the Cultivation Alliance?" "Yuan Jiukui, you have a good idea." Zhu Xinqian's eyes lit up. He slapped his thigh and said loudly, "We will issue a decree in the name of the Cultivation Alliance." Does he dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance? Yuan Jiukui rolled his eyes and sneered, "Zhu Xianxian, don't talk nonsense. What do you mean my idea is good? If you want to do it, do it. Don't drag me into it." As he spoke, he stood up and said, "The war is imminent. I advise everyone to make a decision carefully. Don't let the Cultivation Alliance cause trouble first. I can't make the decision on this matter. I'll have to ask the consecrators in the sect. I'll take my leave first. Goodbye." Only the people in charge of communication were present. The real experts were not present. "Yuan Jiukui, your Six Paths Demon sect is also a big sect. Is there a need to be so afraid of trouble?" Zhu Xinqian's face sank. Yuan Jiukui, who was walking out, turned around and stared at Zhu Xianxian. He shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Zhu Xianxian, some things should be forgotten. There's no need to take it to heart. Sigh. You guys continue the discussion. In short, the Six Paths Demon sect will follow the final decision of the Cultivation Alliance." Then, he turned around and said, "I almost forgot. I have to quickly order the hidden sentries in the sect. There's nothing that kid doesn't dare to do. I hope he doesn't cause any accidents when he runs into him." The group of people watched him disappear outside the door. Bai Shan also stood up and cupped his hands at everyone. "The four families are the same as the Six Paths Demon sect. We will follow the final decision of the Cultivation Alliance. I have something to do. I'll take my leave first." With one or two people taking the lead, the other sects found excuses to leave. In the end, Zhu Xianxian was left alone with a gloomy expression. A good discussion had failed just like that. Leaving the two girls in the room, Yu Qianqiu opened the cabin door and walked out. He then closed it again. More than 100 people were sitting neatly in 2 rows in the cabin. When they heard the voice, they immediately stood up and saluted. Yu Qianqiu signaled everyone to sit down. He then asked the leader of the team, "How's the flying artifact? Are you used to it?" "Very good. It's better than all the ones I've used before." The leader was a little excited. As the two were talking, the flying artifact suddenly slowed down. The two of them swayed. The leader suddenly turned around and shouted, "Company leader, what's going on?" "Leader, someone stopped the flying artifact of the leader of the second team." The leader of the first team who was driving the artifact replied loudly. The leader flashed to the front and seemed to be communicating with the people of the second team. Yu Qianqiu walked over slowly with an expressionless face. Looking through the transparent window, he saw a dozen people in a small flying artifact blocking his way. He snorted coldly and said, "Let's ask who stopped us first." The leader nodded and quickly got it through telepathy. He then reported, "It's a patrol team formed by a few small sects of the Cultivation Alliance. They want us to show our pass token." Yu Qianqiu's expression softened a little. He nodded and said, "I'm doing my job. I'll cooperate with them." The leader took the order, opened the cabin door, and flew out. After showing the pass token, he negotiated with those people. Not only did those people not leave, but they also followed the leader. After the leader flashed in, he asked, "They said they've heard of your name for a long time. They want to pay you a visit." After coming out of the special forces, there was a rule that the title, leader, could not be used outside. Huh? Oh. Let them in. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The leader went to the cabin door and let more than a dozen people in. As soon as these people from the small sects came in, they immediately saw more than 100 masked people staring at them. They suddenly felt a little uneasy and nervous. It was said that these people were all experts of the tribulation stage. This is the Mr. You want to see. The leader waved his hand and said. Yu Qianzhou laughed and walked over. He smiled amiably and said, everyone, you've worked hard. I'm Yu Qianzhou. I don't know what I can do for you. Although Yu Qianzhou's reputation was not very good, his history of struggle had long been something that the young disciples of the various sects talked about. Many grassroots disciples dreamed of becoming someone like Yu Qianzhou. When Yan Bugui brought people to challenge him, Yu Qianzhou killed his opponent with one strike. Although the young disciples of the various sects did not see it with their own eyes, it was spread like wildfire. Especially when he said, so what if I'm famous or not? One strike is enough. This made the grassroots disciples of the various sects worship him crazily. Coincidentally, these people were sent here to investigate suspicious cultivators. When they saw the 6 extraordinary flying artifacts, they thought it was someone from a large sect. They did not expect to meet a legendary grassroots idol. So one of them mustered up the courage to ask for a meeting with the leader. The leader wanted to refuse, but he remembered that Yu Qianzhou was here. It was not good for him to make a decision for him, so he came to ask for instructions. Who knew that Yu Qianzhou would agree without hesitation? The young disciples thought that Yu Qianzhou would be like those people from the large sects and just say a few perfunctory words to them. Who knew that he would be so easy to talk to? The group of disciples from the small sects immediately relaxed a lot. They all bowed and said, I've heard of Mr.'s great name for a long time. We've come to pay our respects. No need to be so polite. We're all friends. If you continue to be so polite, I won't be happy. Yu Qianzhou said, pretending to be angry. Do you also think that I'm like the rumors outside, a scum or a madman in the cultivation world? The dozen or so people were seen through by him. They all scratched their heads and smiled awkwardly. One of them mustered up the courage to reply, to be honest, Mister, we were indeed a little worried before. Now that we've met Mister, we know that those were all rumors. Yes. I believe that what you said is the truth. Other than being a trustworthy person, I also like people who tell the truth the most. Yu Qianzhou patted his shoulder kindly and sighed. But rumors are terrible. Maybe after many years, when your cultivation is successful, you will inevitably encounter similar rumors. I hope that you can treat it with a normal heart. Don't be like me. Sometimes, when I can't hold it in anymore, I get into a fight. It's clearly something I'm in the right, but the more I fight, the worse my reputation becomes. Sigh. I'm a good example. I hope that you can learn from it. This is my advice to you as a person who has been through it. The group of people fell into deep thought when they heard this. The disciple who was patted on the shoulder was a little agitated. From what I see, someone is clearly jealous of Mister, and that's why they purposely spread rumors to slander you. But so what? If I had Mister's ability, I definitely wouldn't forgive anyone who dares to talk about me like that. That's too shallow, too shallow. Yu Qianzhou shook his shoulder and warned him, don't learn from me. If that day comes, you must endure when you need to. You must know that if you take a step back, everything will be fine. If you endure for a while, everything will be fine. Don't be impulsive, understand? Ze and the temptress, who were in the rear cabin, had already opened the cabin door to see what was going on. Now that they heard Yu Qianzhou's tireless and sincere words, the temptress's expression was indescribably strange. Seeing that the group of young cultivators were all silent, Yu Qianzhou patted the disciple's shoulder again and laughed. It's fate that we can meet. Let's not talk about unhappy things. This is my new flying artifact. It's also unique in the cultivation world. Dongfang Cheng A.O. from Fuxin Island and Xiu Wuyuan from 10,000 Demons wanted to come up and have a look, but I coaxed them away. Why don't you all take some time to look around? Let me be the host. Hearing that such a famous person didn't even have the qualifications to come here, these people were indeed eager to try. However, after looking at each other, they all bowed to Yu Qianqiu. The disciple cupped his hands and said, "We appreciate Mr.'s kindness, but we have been ordered to come here. We don't dare to delay for too long, so we bid farewell to Mr. Since you all have important matters to attend to, I won't disturb you anymore." Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and turned to Team Leader 1. "We didn't prepare any greeting gifts. Let's give each of you 10 top-grade spirit stones." "No need, no need." The group of people quickly waved their hands. But Team Leader 1 didn't say anything. He resolutely carried out the order and stuffed a handful of spirit stones into everyone's hands. The group of people held the spirit stones and looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Yu Qianqiu smiled amiably and said, "Take it all. Take it as a greeting gift. Take it as a witness to our reunion." Hearing this, the group couldn't refuse and could only thank him. After they left, the 6 flying artifacts began to speed up. Yu Qianqiu was still waving at them from the cabin door. More than 10 people stood on the small flying artifacts and watched as Yu Qianqiu and the rest disappeared into the distance. They sighed as they looked at the spirit stones in their hands. With Yu Qianqiu's current status in the cultivation world, he didn't even pay attention to the sect masters of a sect. Yet, he looked favorably upon these useless grassroots disciples. Furthermore, he patiently encouraged them with kind words and even gifted them with a large amount of spirit stones. The disciple who had close contact with Yu Qianqiu turned to look at the crowd and said, "All the sects say that Mr. Yu is a scum and a lunatic. I hope that the people who say these things can be as scum and as crazy as Mr. Yu. Then, our cultivation world will be peaceful." Another person sighed. "It's obvious that Mr. Yu is in the limelight. All the sects are obviously working together to suppress him." Sigh. Similar things don't only happen in the cultivation world. We've seen such things in all the sections. Be careful with your words. We can only say these things here. Don't spread it back to the sect. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. What are you afraid of? Don't tell me someone will tell on us. Sigh. Mr. Yu is a good person. A group of disciples who didn't know the truth were bored. They were chattering and vindicating Yu Qianqiu in a small area. It just so happened that the journey was lonely. He didn't expect to become a teacher who spread the truth again. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood. He said to Team Leader 1, "If we encounter similar checks again, invite all the young disciples from the various sects who have low cultivation bases. If they are that old, forget it. Those old and stubborn people have already set their minds. It's hard to change them. Don't waste my breath. Just deal with it." Understood. Team Leader 1 nodded. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to turn and leave, he suddenly thought of something and snorted. "There is one exception. If you encounter people from Daluo's sect, tell Team Leader 2 to first send people to cripple them. Then, don't let any of them go. Capture them all. I want to give Daluo's sect a greeting gift." After giving his instructions, Yu Qianqiu returned to the rear cabin with his hands behind his back. When he entered, he saw Ze looking at him strangely. The allure beauty covered her mouth and giggled. "Mr. Yu is indeed a kind person. He's the model for all sects to learn from. I knew you were a bad woman." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at her. He said to Ze with a serious expression, "Some people's words cannot be trusted easily. Especially those who speak ill of others behind their backs." Hearing this, the allure beauty laughed even more happily. She continued, "Especially those who speak nonsense and lie without blinking. You can't trust the words of these people. Mr. Yu, do you think I'm right? Haha." Chapter 418. A good man doesn't bicker with a woman. Yu Qianqiu threw down these words and confidently returned to his chair to rest. The allure beauty smiled and slowly retreated to the bed. She pulled over the thick blanket and curled up inside. She closed her eyes and looked satisfied, as if she had found what she had been looking for many years. The bed was big enough and Ze sat down cross-legged in a corner. Just as he calmed down, Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to sleep, suddenly discovered that something was wrong with his dantian. He could not help but look inside himself and saw that his nascent soul had actually stopped breathing, and the red and black spheres revolving around it were speeding up. Moreover, it was getting faster and faster, stirring up the quintessential essence in his dantian. The quintessential essence was stirred up like a tornado, and as it spiraled, it seemed to show signs of becoming thicker. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and stood up. A thought popped into his head. Was he going to make a breakthrough again? The two women were also alerted by his movements. Seeing his dignified expression, they looked at each other. Just as the allure beauty was about to ask something, Yu Qianqiu said, "Ze, protect me. My cultivation is about to break through to the middle stage of nascent soul. Don't let anyone disturb me." He sat down cross-legged on the deck and closed his eyes to carefully observe the movement in his dantian. Ziyi's expression became serious. She knew that when a cultivator was about to make a breakthrough, they couldn't be disturbed. If they missed this opportunity, it would be hard for them to make any more progress. She immediately moved to his side and looked around vigilantly. When her gaze swept past the allure beauty, she was actually on guard. After the allure beauty saw what the two were doing, she felt a bit sad. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously called Ze to protect him and didn't call her. It was obvious who the two women were in his heart. Especially Ze's vigilant gaze, it made her even more confused. It turned out that she hadn't really integrated with the two of them. Perhaps they were subconsciously on guard against her. "I'll go guard outside the door in case someone comes in and disturbs you." The allure beauty smiled awkwardly. Purple Dress nodded solemnly. She was on high alert and even pulled the handbrake to have the protective shell cover the transparent window again. The 100 Charm beauty lightly sighed in her heart, and she smiled as she left. "If I don't leave now, then I'm afraid I'll become Ziyi's main target. Is there a need for that?" The movement in his dantian made Yu Qianqiu a little uneasy. The true essence in his dantian was stirred up into a tornado. He had never heard of such a phenomenon before. He also knew that his cultivation method was different from other cultivators. Therefore, he did not have any experience to learn from. However, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. Only when one's true essence became more substantial would it represent that one's cultivation would become more profound. Just like the protective aura released by a transcending tribulation stage expert, only when the true essence was thick to the point that the protective aura released would be hard to break. If it was at the soul formation stage, then the protective aura released would naturally be even more difficult. It was clear that at this moment, the true essence in his dantian was spinning rapidly. It was trying to reach the next level. However, it was like there was no place for it to borrow strength from. It spun in the air, and like a bone scraper, it swept across the walls of his dantian. Yu Qianqiu was in so much pain that he trembled. He clenched his teeth and endured it. That damned nascent soul was sitting peacefully between the red and black beads. There was no reaction at all. How could this be? Ze was shocked. She was also a nascent soul stage cultivator. Although it was uncomfortable, it shouldn't be like this. Increasing the resistance and slowing down the speed should reduce the pain. Yu Qianqiu was in so much pain that his whole body was covered in sweat. He bit his lips so hard that they bled. When he could no longer endure it, this thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Ze saw that he had bitten his lips so hard that they bled. She trembled with fear, but she didn't know how to help him. She just stood there anxiously. Right now, she even wanted to go out and pull the beauty of 100 Charms in to ask her if she knew what was going on. In her anxiousness, she suddenly saw a purple spirit stone appear in each of Yu Qianqiu's hands. The spirit stone's luster gradually dimmed in his palms. The spiritual energy within it was obviously being absorbed. Ze was slightly stunned. She had never used any spirit stones before, but it didn't mean that she didn't know what a purple spirit stone meant. He actually had the legendary top-grade spirit stone. Ze forgot to be anxious. She watched in surprise as he threw away one spirit stone and took another. This big liar. Who knew how many more secrets he was hiding? The rich spiritual energy in the top-grade spirit stone poured into his dantian. Finally, the rotation of the true essence slowed down a little. His dantian became bulging. However, the two damn beads didn't slow down at all. They stirred the true essence in the thick spiritual energy. The beads' rotation speed, the resistance of the spiritual energy, and the limited pressure of the dantian. Under these three forces, the true essence was quickly compressed and gradually became thick. It really worked. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. However, once the true essence was compressed, there was more space left, and the resistance of compression was smaller. It was difficult to continue to compress it further. Without hesitation, Yu Qianqiu absorbed the spiritual energy again. He endured the swelling pain of his dantian and sucked crazily. He desperately increased the pressure of the true essence. When the true essence was compressed a little thicker, he poured spiritual energy into his dantian to fill it. Until the water-like true essence turned into a substance like silk cloth. It was milky white and delicate, and its volume shrank by 100 times. Suddenly, the nascent soul that had stopped breathing suddenly spat out a big bubble, as if it had choked on water in a river. What it spat out was nothing else but a mass of milky white true essence. It merged with the milky white that had been compressed just now. It was as if this thing was blocking his airways, causing him to be unable to breathe. As such, the dual jewels protecting his body had to lend him a helping hand, causing his entire dantian to become restless, and now he was finally able to breathe. In an instant, the whole dantian quieted down. The two beads' rotation speed returned to their usual state of protecting the nascent soul. The nascent soul that could breathe took a deep breath. The rich spiritual energy was sucked in. It rotated in its abdomen and spat out a silk-like white true essence. Yu Qianqiu's whole body shook. He let out a weak moan in comfort. A smile appeared on his face. He finally broke through. Ze also let out a sigh of relief. She also saw that he had broken through. As soon as Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes, he saw Ziyi's suspicious face coming over. He was startled and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to molest me?" Ziyi pointed at the light purple spirit stone in his hand that had not finished absorbing the spiritual energy. She asked, "Do you really have no money? I heard that this top-grade spirit stone is very valuable." Yu Qianqiu looked down. Although he had already absorbed enough spiritual energy, he still forcefully absorbed the remaining spiritual energy. The spirit stone in his hand immediately became a dead gray. No one could tell that it was a top-grade spirit stone. Then, he swept all the dried-up spirit stones on the ground into his storage pouch, got up and patted his butt. "Of course I'm short of money. Don't look down on me because I have a few top-quality spirit stones in my hands. They were given to me by my master to use when I cultivate and advance. I can't just throw away the things that my master told me. Do I have to show off to everyone? Hey! This top-grade spirit stone was given to me by my master. My master has a top-grade spirit stone. If such a good thing were to be known, what do you think the consequences would be?" Ze frowned and nodded solemnly. She said, "It's very likely that someone with ulterior motives will target you. You're really smart. Not bad. This is why I don't let others see it. I'm worried about others, but I don't need to be on guard against you," Yu Qianqiu said. He put his mouth next to Ziyi's ear and whispered, "That's why I asked you to protect me. I didn't ask her to. Do you know why now?" Ziyi heard this and nodded as if nothing had happened. In fact, her face was full of joy and she could not hide it even if she wanted to. When one's cultivation was breaking through, it was best for the most trusted person to be the protector. Choosing her. It turned out that Yu Qianqiu trusted her more. Yu Qianqiu took the opportunity to breathe in the faint fragrance of a virgin. He smacked his lips and found that it was slightly painful. Only then did he realize that he had bitten his lips. Thus, he let out a puddle of water. Under Ziyi's careful guidance, he washed the blood on his mouth. The Allure Beauty leaned on the outside and looked at the more than 100 people. There was no joy or sorrow on her face. She was lost in her thoughts. The cabin door suddenly opened. Ziyi poked her head out and smiled. The 100 Charms Beauty was startled. She turned around and went in, only to see Yu Qianqiu standing there with his legs crossed. The protective shell on top of his head had been opened again, and the sky outside was already filled with stars. You broke through? The Allure Beauty walked to Yu Qianqiu and asked with a smile. There was a bitterness hidden in her smile. It seemed that this question was a bit unnecessary. If he did not break through, it would be strange if he could be so carefree. Yu Qianqiu smiled proudly and answered her in this way. The Allure Beauty did not ask any more questions. She still had a seductive smile on her face. She casually returned to the bed and continued to curl up in the thick blanket. She suddenly felt that she should have a good sleep. Perhaps her mood would be better tomorrow. The stars in the night sky were so brilliant. They were so deep, beautiful, and enchanting. However, they did not make her open her eyes for a while. She, who had been meditating and resting for many years, actually fell asleep quietly. The next day, the 6 flying artifacts in the sky were the first to bear the light of the rising sun. Lying on the chair, Yu Qianqiu still felt that it was dazzling with his eyes closed. He tilted his head to look. Ziyi was meditating at the corner of the bed. Her expression was solemn. The blue velvet blanket on the side was half wrapped around a beautiful body. The red muslin had been rolled up at some point, and 2 extremely seductive jade legs were quietly resting on the blanket. The half-rolled-up blue velvet hooked onto the 2 jade legs, making the 2 thighs appear even more white and creamy. The worst thing was that a certain person did not know how to restrain himself when he slept. Although he was wearing underwear, he did not know how to cover his private parts. I have sinned, I have sinned. Sex is emptiness, emptiness is sex. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could only recite the Sex Sutra 10 times in his heart. He turned his head and forced himself to face the dazzling sunlight. He shouted in his heart, eyesight. Blind my eyes with that stab. Chapter 419. The 6 flying artifacts sped across the sky and did not stop at all, but there were exceptions. Team 2 followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and invited all the young disciples who were being interrogated by the Cultivation Alliance to Utopia No. 1 to accept Yu Qianqiu's ideological reform. However, Yu Qianqiu had a bad reputation, and some disciples were really afraid. They did not want to go, but they could not stand the other party's warm invitation. After meeting Yu Qianqiu, they were instantly touched by Yu Qianqiu's spring breeze-like warmth. After receiving the greeting gifts, they regretted listening to the rumors. In Yu Qianqiu's words, this was called moving with emotion and understanding with reason. Of course, that was a greeting gift. The sect set up many similar interrogation points everywhere, and then set up a communication matrix within a certain range. Naturally, this was to make it convenient for them to report to the Cultivation Alliance in time if they discovered anything suspicious. Therefore, the Cultivation Alliance received the news that Yu Qianqiu's 6 flying artifacts were closing in. The interrogation points asked, did Yu Qianqiu and the others cooperate with the interrogation? Did they cause any trouble? What surprised the various sects was that the replies from many of the interrogations all said, Yu Qianqiu actively cooperated with the interrogations. His attitude was very good, and there were no signs of him causing trouble at all. Accidents were accidents, but not causing trouble was a good thing. The sects that had participated in the poaching sighed in relief. Daluo's sect had instructed their disciples to be on guard. If they encountered Yu Qianqiu and his attitude was not good, they must tolerate it as much as they could, lest Yu Qianqiu take the opportunity to cause trouble. But after receiving such news, Zhu Xianxian was relieved. It seemed that Yu Qianqiu did not dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance. At least he knew what was good for him. When the Daluo sect disciples received the warning from the sect, they were all terrified. Everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu had a deep grudge with the Daluo sect. They had clashed with each other again and again. Even the sect master's son was killed by that bastard. What else could he not do? It was said that he had brought more than 600 cultivators at the crossing calamity stage with him. What should he do? Zhao Cheng was an early-stage tribulation passing elder of the Daluo sect. He was usually by the side of Luo Kun, one of the top experts of the Daluo sect. Now that he had been sent to a checkpoint of the Daluo sect, it was truly a waste of his talents. In this battle, Luo Kun and several experts in the late tribulation passing stage had come to help the Daluo sect. He could be considered the number one figure among the people from the Daluo sect. After receiving Zhu Xianqian's report about Yu Qianqiu, Luo Kun ordered his men to calculate Yu Qianqiu's route and send his trusted aide, Zhao Cheng, to the place where Yu Qianqiu must pass. The purpose was simple. Put aside the past and try to restrain the disciples from clashing with Yu Qianqiu at this time. Otherwise, they would become a laughing stock to the other sections. Now was not the time to settle the score. Zhao Cheng had been with Luo Kun for a long time. In the Daluo sect, no one dared to disrespect him. After a long time, he inevitably became a little arrogant. In his heart, he also felt that he had been wronged. He had been sent to a small checkpoint to deal with a rogue. Although he was unwilling, he did not dare to object to Luo Kun's arrangement. In the sea of clouds, the Daluo sect's flying artifact was hidden. This way, it was convenient for them to observe the surroundings. On the flying artifact, there were 15 people, including Zhao Cheng. A leader named Lu Su looked at the arrogant Zhao Cheng and asked carefully, "Elder Zhao, why does that Yu Qianqiu always make life difficult for our Daluo sect?" Humph. Zhao Cheng glared at him and snorted. You Daluo sect disciples should remember this. Kind people get bullied, and tame horses get ridden. Our Daluo sect is ranked second among the righteous sects, so you must show the backbone of a great sect. Don't be like some people who can remain indifferent even when their own sons are killed after suffering a bit. Humph. Boosting the morale of others while lowering our own prestige is a great humiliation to the Daluo sect. Lu Su clicked his tongue. He had long heard that this elder Zhao was arrogant, but he didn't think he would dare say such things to that person. He naturally knew who Zhao Cheng's son was killed, but the topic was too sensitive. He didn't dare continue. If word got out, an early core formation realm disciple like him wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Thinking of this, Lu Su couldn't help but worry. As soon as he received the news from the sect, he was prepared to avoid Yu Qianqiu's flying artifact and hide in the clouds. No matter how much Yu Qianqiu hated the Daluo sect, he couldn't possibly search for them everywhere. Who knew that the front lines would send this guy to restrain them? From his tone, it sounded like he was here to restrain them. He was clearly pushing them into a pit of fire. Sigh. Just hide in the Daluo sect and act arrogantly. Why didn't you think about what kind of person Yu Qianqiu was? He didn't care what sect you were from. Even sect master Luo Qingtian, a mid-tribulation passing cultivator, lost an arm in a one-on-one duel. Why did you, an early tribulation passing cultivator, come looking for trouble? Lu Su turned around and exchanged a glance with the people behind him. He could see that everyone had a hint of worry on their faces, and it was clear that they all had the same concerns as him. Lu Su couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. He hoped that Elder Zhao didn't want to lose face in front of the disciples and deliberately said something like that. What he feared had come. In the distance, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air could be heard. With a little effort, they could tell that there were 6 flying artifacts, which matched the number of flying artifacts Yu Qianqiu had brought. The expressions of the dozen or so people changed drastically. After looking at each other, they all looked at Elder Zhao. Zhao Cheng snorted slightly and steered his flying artifact into the clouds to look into the distance. In the distance, 6 black dots were flying in their direction at high speed and would soon meet them. Zhao Cheng directly controlled the flying Dharma artifact to rush out and tyrannically blocked the path of the 6 flying Dharma artifacts. The 6 flying artifacts had clearly noticed them as well and slowed down as they approached. The group from the exalted sect sized up the 6 celestial artifacts in front of them. They were oddly shaped, and even under the bright sun, they exuded an eerie aura. They even had eyes at the front, and through those transparent eyes, they could vaguely see people sitting inside. The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance to interrogate suspicious cultivators. If you have a pass, hand over your pass. If you don't, open your cabin and accept the interrogation. Zhao Cheng clearly wanted to show off his strength to Yu Qianqiu and the others. When he roared, even the disciples behind him felt as though their ears were about to explode. The Daluo sect disciples held their breaths and watched the other party's movements. After Zhao Cheng's shout, the 3 flying artifacts in the triangular formation at the front suddenly moved. It was as if the eyes had suddenly closed. The group did not understand what was going on. Zhao Cheng snorted coldly and shouted again, "The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance." "How dare you!" The tone of the shout suddenly changed. The group of people were also startled by the other party's movements. They saw the 3 flying artifacts in front of them shooting over in a frenzy, directly colliding with the small flying artifacts beneath their feet. They did not even say a word to each other. "Oh my God!" The Daluo sect disciples cried out and jumped down from their flying artifacts. After they dodged the impact, they released their flying swords and steadied themselves in the air. Looking up, they saw that Zhao Cheng was clearly trying to dodge with his flying artifact. However, it happened so suddenly, and the 3 monstrous things had deliberately planned for this. There was a loud bang in the air. Zhao Cheng leaped into the air and flew away. The flying artifact under his feet was knocked far away, and he quickly rolled toward the dear earth to hug it. The group of disciples still had lingering fear, and a bad feeling welled up in their hearts. At first, everything was fine, but when they heard that it was the Daluo sect, they immediately became impolite. They clearly did not like the Daluo sect. "How dare you! How dare you defy the decree of the Cultivation Alliance!" Zhao Cheng shouted, and a cold light flashed from his storage bag. Under his guidance, it first shot into the sky, then quickly turned around and shot toward one of the flying artifacts. Bang! There was a loud bang, and the flying sword hit its target smoothly. Zhao Cheng recalled his flying sword and was slightly taken aback. Under his full strength, the other party's flying artifact was actually undamaged. Even the scratch was not very obvious, almost unnoticeable. Oh my! What material is this flying artifact made of? The expressions of the Daluo sect disciples below all changed. They saw that Zhao Cheng's sword seemed to have poked a hornet's nest. Dozens of black shadows flashed out from the flying artifact that was hit. More than a dozen of them shot into the sky and surrounded Zhao Cheng from all directions. The rest of them scattered. The disciples' vision blurred, and they found that each of them was standing in front of a masked man in black, staring at them indifferently. The words, "itinerant cultivator," on the men's chests made the disciples subconsciously shiver. They immediately remembered the news they had heard recently. Yen Bugui led a group of tribulation stage experts to sneak attack the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu suddenly attacked, and the 600 itinerant cultivators under him killed almost all of the tribulation stage experts without suffering any losses. Zhao Cheng looked around in the sky and saw that he was surrounded by masked men in black, and they were all at the early stage of the tribulation stage, similar to his cultivation level. He immediately waved his hand and shouted, "How dare you! I am a disciple of Daluo sect's Honorable Luo Kuan. You itinerant cultivators dare to surround me? Are you tired of living? Who is Luo Kuan?" A strange question came from below. Zhao Cheng looked down and saw a man and 2 women standing on one of the flying artifacts. The man was asking an enchanting woman a question. The enchanting woman giggled and said, "Luo Kuan is the honorable cultivator of Daluo sect in the late stage of the tribulation stage. It is said that he is ranked 3rd in the Daluo sect. He is the leader of the Daluo sect's expedition to the East Sea." "Oh. Then I'll have to ask him why his Daluo sect keeps looking for trouble with me." The man nodded slightly. Zhao Cheng shouted, "Who is down there? Come up and answer me." Even at this time, the man's tone was still so unyielding. As expected of a big sect. Where did this old bastard come from? He really doesn't know his place. After the man cursed, he waved his hand and pointed. Cut that stubborn guy into a human stick, seal his dantian, and bring him here. Don't kill him. This is my greeting gift to the Daluo sect. Chapter 420. If you remove his limbs, you'll be called a human stick. The Daluo sect members were shocked to hear this. Seeing him call out to these wandering cultivators, they could vaguely guess who he was. You're Yu Qianqiu. Zhao Chang's eyes widened in anger. How could he hesitate when he heard the other party's words? Before the wandering cultivators could make a move, he released his stellar energy to protect himself. His sword created a huge sword shadow with all his might, and he slashed out wildly, forcing the masked wandering cultivators in front of him to retreat. It seemed that he was not afraid, or he would not have to run for his life. But with so many people here, and with his stellar energy slowing him down, where could he run? He had just run a few dozen meters when a group of flying swords attacked him, hitting his stellar energy with a bang bang. He was knocked upside down in the air. A dozen or so black shadows flashed and immediately trapped him again. The dozen or so people called back their flying swords and raised them together, creating a huge sword shadow that struck Zhao Chang's stellar energy from all directions. With a loud bang, the protective aura shield instantly disappeared. Zhao Chang, who was inside, was also shocked until he was dizzy. His face was pale, and blood oozed from his nostrils. His eyes were dazzled, but he knew that survival was the most important thing at this time. He wanted to raise his sword to protect himself, but he found that his arms were light. When he came back to his senses, Zhao Chang let out a scream of horror. He didn't know when his arms and legs had been separated from his body. No wonder they were so light. Yu Qianqiu. Zhao Chang howled in grief, but a black shadow flashed by and struck his abdomen with a palm. His body shook, and he immediately felt his dantian locked, unable to circulate his spiritual origin. His whole body quickly withered, and he quickly fell from the sky. The people below grabbed his belt and quickly patted the roots of his severed limbs, stopping the gushing blood. Yu Qianqiu, you'll die a horrible death. Zhao Chang howled unwillingly. Not far away, Lu Su sighed slightly. He was really used to being flattered in the Daluo sect. He was so arrogant that he didn't even know who he was. He only regretted it when he suffered a loss. Hee. I'd like to see who will die a horrible death. Sharp-tongued, come on. Break his teeth and pull out his tongue. Yu Qianqiu sneered with his hands behind his back. This was the first time he had encountered such a reckless person. If he did not treat him well, he would be letting down the grand immortal sect's efforts in nurturing him. Yu Qianqiu, don't you dare. As soon as Zhao Chang said that, the masked man lifted him up high and punched him in the mouth. The sound of his teeth cracking was hair-raising. The Daluo sect disciples watched as the masked man moved his hand around Zhao Chang's mouth. Then, the masked man pulled out something bright red and threw it away. Zhao Chang's neck went limp and he fainted. The disciples trembled in fear as they looked at the masked man in front of them. Purple Dress turned her head slightly to the side, as if she couldn't accept something that was too cruel. The Allure Beauty's pupils shrank slightly. Yu Qianqiu looked coldly at the Daluo sect disciples around him and said indifferently, "You're just small fries in the Daluo sect. I shouldn't have bothered with you. If you want to blame someone, blame yourselves for being Daluo sect disciples and getting involved in the grudge between me and the Daluo sect. You can't blame others for this." He waved his hand lightly and said, "Cripple their cultivation, but spare their lives." The dozen or so Daluo sect disciples immediately turned pale with fright. They had cultivated so hard, who would be willing to be a mere mortal? Once their cultivation was crippled, it would be a fate worse than death. Now, they probably couldn't do it anymore. There was no need for any discussion. The dozen or so disciples held on to their last glimmer of hope and fled frantically. However, the difference in their cultivation was too great. In the blink of an eye, the masked man caught up to them. Cries of pain rang out in the air as their dantian was destroyed. From then on, they would no longer be able to gather true yuan to cultivate. The group of disciples who were as limp as sheep were thrown into the flying artifacts. The 6 black figures moved again and sped east. At the shore of the eastern sea, in the empty backyard of a large residence, a communication array was set up. 4 elders wearing the Luo sect's uniform frowned. The one standing at the front was Luo Kuan, and the 3 behind him were also consecrators of the Luo sect. They were called Chui Zhaofan, Li Mengbai, and Zhu Zhao. Luo Kuan said to one of the disciples in the spirit stone array, "Still no contact?" The disciple replied with some fear, "I've already asked the disciples of the other sects nearby to help me search. They really haven't found any disciples from our sect. It's already been a day. It's impossible for Zhao Chang and the others to not contact this place for so long. Something must have happened." As Luo Kuan spoke, he turned to look at the 3 elders behind him. The 3 of them nodded slightly, clearly agreeing with him. Zhu Xianxian, who was standing to the side, bowed respectfully to the 4 elders and said, "For consecrators, in this disciple's opinion, there shouldn't be any accidents under normal circumstances. If there really is an accident, I'm afraid that Yu Qianshou will have something to do with it. If we calculate the time we lost contact with them, it should be around the same time as Yu Qianshou." Luo Kuan nodded slightly, then asked the other 3 consecrators, "What do you think?" "Zhu Xianxian, I want to ask you something," Li Mengbai, the youngest of the 4 consecrators, said as he looked into the sky. "Consecrator, please ask." "This disciple will tell you everything he knows," Zhu Xianxian said respectfully. Li Mengbai slowly retracted his gaze and stared at him, saying, "You've interacted with Yu Qianshou the most, so you should know him well. If something really happened to Zhao Chang at the hands of Yu Qianshou, I want to ask you, why does Yu Qianshou keep targeting our Luo sect? This person is narrow-minded, and he's a notorious scoundrel in the cultivation world. Ever since he became enemies with our Luo sect, he's been harboring a grudge against us. If we don't get rid of this person and allow him to continue developing, he'll become a scourge to our sect sooner or later," Zhu Xianxian said in one breath. "Oh." Li Mengbai nodded noncommittally and said, "I heard that the Cultivation Alliance's idea to divide up the 600 cultivators under Yu Qianshou was your idea?" Zhu Xianxian suddenly realized that the consecrator's tone was a little off. He paused and said, "Yes, this disciple believes that we can't let them grow any further and should disband them as soon as possible. That's why I came up with this idea. All the other sects think the same way." "Oh." Li Mengbai nodded and asked again, "Then why did I hear that Yu Qianshou didn't provoke our Luo sect back in the 100 Flowers Valley, but you always went against Yu Qianshou?" "This disciple did not go against Yu Qianshou. I only fought for the interests of our sect. This is my duty," Zhu Xianxian said with some fear. Zhu Zhao, who was standing to the side, took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "As the head of our sect's external affairs, you should fight for the interests of our sect. This is the right thing to do. Remember this in the future." His words affirmed Zhu Xianxian's contribution. "Yes, this disciple will remember," Zhu Xianxian said sincerely. Zhu Zhao was his uncle. If it weren't for this uncle, he wouldn't have been able to become the external manager of the Luo sect. Zhu Zhao's words were clearly helping him out of this predicament. Li Mengbai glanced at the uncle and nephew, then exchanged glances with the other 2 consecrators and said nothing more. Looking at the time, Yu Qianshou and the others should have arrived by now. Whether or not Yu Qianshou and Zhao Chang's disappearance was caused by him, we can ask him. After saying that, Zhu Zhao turned to Zhu Xianxian and asked, "Have there been any movements from Limitless Island recently?" "There hasn't been any big movement, but there are still reinforcements coming from time to time." Zhu Xianxian hesitated for a moment, then said, "There has been something strange recently. Corpses are constantly floating over from Wuji Island. After the various sects have fished them up and examined them, they have all dug pits and buried them. In the past few days, there have probably been more than 10,000 corpses. The four of them looked at each other. Zhu Zhao frowned and said, "Can you tell where they came from? Are they mortals or cultivators?" "They are all wearing Huaxia's clothing. Most of them are mortals, but those cultivators are the disciples of the various sects who were kidnapped in the previous battles. The main meridians of those mortals were severed. Clearly, they died from having their blood drained. As for those cultivators, they are even stranger. Holes have been dug out of their dantian, as if someone had taken away their core or nascent soul. This is really puzzling." Zhu Xianxian shook his head and said. "Something like this actually happened? Those people don't even let mortals go. What are they trying to do?" Luo Kuan said angrily. As they were talking, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air came from afar. In the blink of an eye, 6 of them flew past the courtyard. Zhu Xianxian looked at the sky and said, "It should be Yu Qianqiu and the others." "That's good." Zhu Zhao sneered at them and said, "Let's go take a look at what this Yu Qianqiu looks like, the one who made our Daluo sect lose face. We can also ask him if what happened to Zhao Chang has anything to do with him." The few Daluo sect consecrators nodded in tacit agreement and walked outside together. Clearly, they all wanted to get to know this Yu Qianqiu. Zhu Xianxian, who was following behind them, sneered. "Since the 4 consecrators are personally coming, let's see where this Yu Qianqiu can run to now." Although the sect's defensive line was long, the main force was gathered in this Wanghai town. Due to the prominent terrain, it was suitable for observing the enemy. In addition, the mortals who lived here had been forcibly moved away, so it naturally became the first choice for the sects to stay. There was a large open space in the town. Originally, it was a place where the fishermen who fished by the sea gathered to dry and repair their nets. Now, it had become a good place for the sects to gather manpower. At this moment, many people from the sects slowly walked out. Seeing the 6 strange flying artifacts land in the sky, everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu had arrived. Aside from wanting to see Yu Qianqiu, the 600 wandering cultivators were also the focus of everyone's attention. After all, many sects had paid a large amount of spirit stones for them. If they were really worth fighting for, many sects would not give up so easily. The leading flying artifacts hatch opened, and Yu Qianqiu slowly walked out with a dark expression. Behind him were the beauty of 100 charms and purple dress. The other flying artifacts did not move, and the 600 wandering cultivators did not come down either. Something was strange. More and more people gathered around. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a dark expression and sneered. He turned around and shouted, "Throw those Daluo sect guys out." Chapter 421. The various sects glanced at each other, then turned their gazes to the Daluo sect side, a trace of doubt in their eyes. Could there be people from the Daluo sect on these 6 flying artifacts? The Daluo sect's representatives looked as if they had expected this. The disappearance of Zhao Chang and the others was indeed related to Yu Qianqiu. As long as they were still alive, everything was fine. However, they were afraid that Yu Qianqiu would destroy the evidence after killing them and refuse to admit to it. If that happened, even if they could find out the truth, it would take a lot of effort. Zhu Xianxian sneered. If the people who came out were really Zhao Chang and the others, then today's matter would be settled. With the 4 great reverends of the Daluo sect here, they would not let Yu Qianqiu get away scot-free again. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, 15 masked men in black flashed out from the cabin door behind him. Each of them had a person in their hands, and they threw them forward, causing them to cry out in pain. Everyone looked over and saw that these people were indeed wearing the uniform of the Daluo sect, and each of them was struggling weakly on the ground. One of them was covered in blood, and the most frightening thing was that all 4 of his limbs had been chopped off. At this moment, he was facing the Daluo sect's direction with his mouth wide open, howling in pain. From the look of grief and indignation on his face, it was clear that he had nowhere to vent his endless hatred. None of the people present were ordinary people, and their eyesight was far stronger than that of mortals. After a closer look, they were all shocked. The one who had lost all 4 limbs was actually Zhao Chang, a disciple of Reverend Luo Kuan of the Daluo sect. As for the other disciples, their cultivations had been crippled. Everyone was shocked. This Yu Qianzhou was too bold. After leaving people in such a state, he didn't even know to kill them, instead throwing them out in front of everyone. It seemed like their previous guess was correct. Yu Qianzhou must have known that the Daluo sect had come up with the idea to poach his people, and now he was here to take revenge. What a lunatic. Everyone from the Daluo sect paled. Zhu Xianxian even cried out in alarm, "Elder Zhao," and rushed over in a flash. The 15 black-clothed men did not need to be told, they all flashed in front of Yu Qianzhou, blocking Zhu Xianxian. Zhu Xianxian was well informed, so he naturally knew how powerful these masked men were. He stopped in his tracks and pointed at Yu Qianzhou, shouting, "Yu Qianzhou, how dare you treat my Daluo sect's disciple like this?" At this point, there was no need for the Daluo sect's people to call out to them. All of them quickly rushed over, and soon, over 1,000 of them had arrived. Without saying a word, the 15 masked men released flying swords from their storage pouches and held them in their hands as they faced off against the 1,000 exalted sect disciples without the slightest fear. Zhu Xianxian turned around and saw so many Daluo sect disciples backing him up. His courage was boosted, and he jabbed his finger at Zhu Xianxian again. "Yu Qianzhou, today is the day you die. All of you, back off." At Yu Qianzhou's order, the 15 black-clothed men dragged the dozen or so Daluo sect disciples on the ground and quickly moved behind him. Yu Qianzhou's cold gaze swept across the Daluo sect, and he slowly took a few steps forward. Then, he stepped on Zhao Chang, who was struggling and howling, so hard that he could barely move. "How dare you!" The Daluo sect's revered elders shouted in unison. Yu Qianzhou's actions were no different from slapping the Daluo sect's face in public. Zhu Xianxian's body moved. He wanted to go over and save Yu Qianzhou, but he saw Yu Qianzhou take out 2 big black sabers from his storage pouch. Zhu Xianxian jumped in fright. He forcefully stabilized himself and didn't rush over. "You want to fight?" Yu Qianzhou raised an eyebrow. The 2 sabers in his hands clashed, and the sound of metal clapping resounded through the air. It was neither wood nor metal, and no one could tell what rare material the sabers were made of. With the clapping of the sabers, the cabin doors of the flying magic artifacts all opened. Everyone's eyes widened, and more than 600 masked loose cultivators came out in an instant. Yu Qianzhou turned his head and glanced at them. It seemed that he had found the feeling of being the boss in his previous life, calling on his subordinates to fight. He had worked hard for so long, and this was the day he had been waiting for. He turned back to the Daluo sect and sneered, "I'll play with you if you want to use force, but I still want to make things clear. Besides being a trustworthy person, I'm also a reasonable person." The various sects looked at the strength of both sides in shock. The Daluo sect had almost double the number of masked loose cultivators. There were nearly 100 tribulation stage cultivators and 4 peak experts in the final stage. On the other hand, on Yu Qianzhou's side, more than 600 cultivators were all in the tribulation stage. The purple-clothed girl was also in the final stage. It was said that she had killed an expert of the same cultivation level in the 100 Flowers Valley. She could probably fight against 2 of them. The strength of both sides was completely on par. Seeing this, the various sects could not help but feel a little emotional. This guy had really grown. He had the strength to fight against the second largest sect of the Orthodox sections. Of course, this was only a portion of the Daluo sect's strength. It would be a joke if they thought that they could fight against the entire Daluo sect with just 600 people. How could a large sect that had stood in the cultivation world for thousands of years be shaken by a mere 600 tribulation stage cultivators? However, what the various sects did not know was that these 600 people were also a portion of Yu Qianzhou's strength. Utopia's army of nearly 10,000 was already preparing for battle. Once the time was ripe, Yu Qianzhou would probably attack the Daluo sect first. One was a powerful force that was out in the open, while the other was a huge army of cultivators hiding in the dark. Sooner or later, there would be a day when they would clash fiercely. Who would win and who would lose? Luo Kun walked over slowly and pushed Zhu Xianxian behind him. After glancing at the grotesque Zhao Cheng on the ground, he stared coldly at Yu Qianzhou and spat out 2 words. Release him. His attitude was very firm, and his meaning was very clear. I don't care if you want to fight or reason with me. Release him unconditionally first, or the consequences will be dire. The other 3 worshippers also walked over with ashen faces and stood beside Luo Kun. When Zhu Zhao brushed past Zhu Xianxian, he also glared at him coldly. Clearly, he was blaming Zhu Zhao for weakening the prestige of the De Luo sect. Zhu Xianxian felt that he was wronged and lowered his head slightly. He thought to himself, don't you know the power of those 2 sabers? They have already defeated several tribulation stage cultivators. Moreover, if I charge forward, Yu Qianzhou will definitely kill me. I'm afraid that I won't be able to return even if I charge forward. Regardless of Zhu Xianxian's attitude, when the 4 De Luo sect experts in the late tribulation stage appeared, their imposing manner immediately silenced the crowd. The atmosphere was very heavy. No one from the various sects came out to mediate. Yu Qianzhou had gone too far, and even the supporting Immortal Island was too embarrassed to step in. This had completely damaged the De Luo sect's reputation, and no one would be able to stop him. Seeing the 4 people appear, Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes slightly. He stabbed his sabers into the ground and cupped his fists. May I know who the 4 of you are from the De Luo sect? Release him. Luo Kun spat out these 2 words in reply. His tone sounded like it was the final warning. The allure beauty behind Yu Qianzhou transmitted her voice. This person is Zhao Cheng's master, Luo Kun, a worshipper of the De Luo sect. The other 3 are also worshippers of the De Luo sect. They are all experts in the late tribulation stage. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, so it's the 4 worshippers of the De Luo sect. I apologize for my lack of manners. The 4 of them immediately knew that someone had transmitted a message to Yu Qianzhou. Their gazes all fell on the 100 Charms beauty. Zhu Zhao shouted, 100 Charms beauty, your demon illusion palace has already been erased from the cultivation world. Why don't you behave yourself? Are you going to get involved in this matter? The allure beauty smiled noncommittally and immediately maintained her silence. Not speaking at this time meant that she was reserving some leeway. Perhaps it would be more advantageous for Yu Qianzhou to act when the opportunity arose. Ze. Yu Qianzhou called out. Ze also understood the seriousness of the situation. She immediately teleported to his side and used her actions to show that she was in the late tribulation stage. The 4 people's pupils shrank slightly as they stared at her. Facing someone who could kill an expert in the late tribulation stage, no one dared to underestimate her. It seems that the 4 seniors of the De Luo sect want to teach us a lesson. I'll leave the 4 seniors to you. You just need to hold them off for a while and I'll deal with the others. At that time, I'll lend you a hand. No problem, right? Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. Yes. Ze nodded heavily. She glanced at the 4 people and took out the purplish-black bamboo. There was an uncontrollable excitement on her face. The various sects sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that this madman was going to clash head-on with the Daluo sect. At a time like this, when they were facing off against a foreign enemy, such a large-scale battle would be a loss for the Chinese cultivation world regardless of who won. Quan Deming of Fuxian Island finally couldn't help but shout, everyone, think of the big picture. If there's anything, we can talk it over. Since it has come to this, there's nothing to talk about. Zhu Zhao waved his hand at Quan Deming and shouted, Yu Qianzhou, die. His figure flashed and he struck out with his palm. A huge palm shadow came crashing down. Ze, who was standing at the side, rushed forward and shouted, fight. The purple bamboo in her hand also turned into a huge shadow. With a bang, the shadow of the palm shadow was destroyed. A strong airflow spread out. Damn it. It's that bullsh *T De Luo mountain splitting palm again. Yu Qianzhou cursed in his heart. He thought that by showing off his strength, the other party would have some misgivings. Then, he would be able to talk his way out of this. Who knew that the other party wouldn't just let this matter rest and would rather make it bigger? Since that's the case, what else is there to say? I'm not afraid. Without another word, Yu Qianqiu dragged his saber with both hands and directly split Zhao Chang, who was under his feet, into two. Then, he pointed his saber forward and shouted, "Kill!" With Yu Qianqiu as an example, the dozen disciples of the Deluo sect were instantly killed on the spot. More than 600 masked men quickly divided into small combat teams and neatly charged into the enemy's group. Luo Kun and the other two were also shocked. They didn't expect Zhu Zhao to attack just like that. He didn't even greet the three of them. But since the enemy had already launched a large-scale attack, they naturally had to protect their own side first. The three of them quickly exchanged glances and immediately shot up into the sky, rushing into the group of 600 masked loose cultivators. 6 palms flashed and flashed as fast as shadows. Like a gust of wind, the three of them consecutively killed more than 10 people. The dozen screams made Yu Qianqiu's heart skip a beat. He didn't think much of Ze and the late-stage tribulation passing expert, but he didn't expect the late-stage tribulation passing expert to be so terrifying. Killing early-stage tribulation passing experts was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Watching the dozen members fall from the sky and die, he immediately shouted, "Don't bother with the three of them. The others are your targets." As soon as these words came out, a few more people fell from the sky. But after hearing this warning, the special forces immediately stopped risking their lives to fight the three. Instead, they pounced into the group of Deluo sect disciples and started a frenzied massacre. Screams rang out everywhere as the Deluo sect disciples fiercely counterattacked. However, as soon as the battle started, the Deluo sect disciples realized that their side had more than 1,000 people, but they didn't seem to have more than 600 people on their side. It seemed as if they were surrounded by masked men in black, and they were being attacked from all directions. Just as they tried to deal with them, a flying sword suddenly pierced through their chest, and they fell to the ground with a look of disbelief on their faces. And when they attacked, the enemy seemed to have people helping them everywhere, so they didn't have to worry about their rear being exposed. As soon as they attacked, someone would immediately deflect their flying sword, and then they would be attacked for no reason. Up in the sky, Luo Kun and the other two glanced at the scene below and immediately felt their hearts skip a beat. Although the masked men in black could not withstand a single blow from them, they were like hungry wolves charging into a flock of sheep when they charged into the Deluo sect disciples. The Deluo sect disciples had no way of fighting back against the flawless teamwork of the other party. The masked man in black constantly changed the most advantageous formation. His attacks and defenses were balanced as he slaughtered the Deluo sect disciples wantonly, killing them one by one. In an instant, 200 to 300 of the nearly 1,000 Deluo sect disciples fell, and the rest fell into a state of panic and fear. Faced with such a sharp combination of attacks, they were unable to organize an effective attack, and in an instant, blood and flesh flew everywhere. The various sects were dumbfounded, and they looked at each other. They didn't expect the 600 people under Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. Why did it seem as if every one of them had been through hundreds of battles? In this exchange, the Deluo sect suffered great losses. Both sides of the massacre were from the Cultivation Alliance. The various sects were worried, but they couldn't help either side. Luo Kun and the other two were stunned for a moment, and another 200 Deluo sect disciples fell. In just a short period of time, almost half of the disciples had lost their lives. How could this be? The three's expressions changed, and without hesitation, they took out their flying swords from their storage bags. Luo Kun shouted, "You two deal with those loose cultivators, I'll eliminate them." Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai quickly flashed to the sky above the battlefield. The flying swords hovering in the air were as fast as lightning, rising and falling towards the masked men in black below. Luo Kun, on the other hand, glared at Yu Qianqiu. The latter was slightly shocked, and thought to himself, so the so-called elimination was referring to me. Ze. Finish the battle quickly. Kill the opponent and help our brothers get rid of the other two, shouted Yu Qianzhou as he glanced at the Special Forces offensive. With the addition of 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage, not only did the Special Forces suffer more casualties, but their attacking formation was also in chaos. If this continued, the entire team would be wiped out. Zhu Zhao was already in a difficult situation, and Yu Qianzhou's shout was simply asking for his life. Ze immediately unleashed the great art of teleportation to the extreme. The purple bamboo she controlled flickered in and out of sight, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. No matter how hard Zhu Zhao tried, he couldn't get rid of the opponent. It was as if he was possessed by a ghost, and he could only barely defend himself. He felt like his life was hanging by a thread. He anxiously shouted, "Luo Kuan, quickly come and help me." Luo Kuan was about to kill Yu Qianzhou, but when he heard Ziyi's shout, he was immediately shocked. To the sect, losing 1 expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage was a great loss. How could they not save him? He immediately teleported over and fought Ze with Zhu Zhao's dual swords. Ze! Hold on! Yu Qianzhou roared. He turned his head and stared at the 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage who were trying to kill the members of the Special Forces. A ruthless and cruel aura appeared on his face. He threw the broadswords in his hands into his storage bag, and with a flick of his sleeves, black shadows started to appear. The green flying swords that he used to use were now abandoned, and were replaced by black flying swords. Chapter 422. When Yan Bugui brought people to the 100 Flowers Valley to challenge, many people had seen Yu Qianzhou's thousands of green flying swords. They were quite powerful. The strange whip that everyone was helpless against was defeated by his flying swords. Yan Cheng, who was in the middle stage of tribulation passing, was even killed by his flying swords. Now, a black flying sword had appeared. Since he could use it in this battle, it must be even more powerful. Currently, the situation of the battle had been turned around by the 4 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Once Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai used their flying swords, the 600 masked rogue cultivators immediately suffered heavy losses. As the leader, Yu Qianzhou couldn't wait any longer. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, thousands of flying swords covered the sky and covered the earth as they wrapped around him and directly pounced towards Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai. All the sects were shocked. This guy actually wanted to fight against 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing alone. He was a complete lunatic. The people of the supporting Immortal Island had an inseparable affection for Yu Qianzhou. When they saw this scene, they all shook their heads and remained silent. Oh, Sihai even sighed. The good seedling that he had taken a fancy to was probably going to die here. No one thought that Yu Qianzhou could survive the attacks of 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Bai Shan of the 4 clans turned around and sent a telepathic message. The disciples of the 4 clans quickly gathered and were ready to help as soon as the order was given. Seeing this, all the sects cursed inwardly. The 4 clans were probably going to help Yu Qianzhou. Hua Rui and Hua Inue of the Moon clan looked at each other and nodded slightly. Their attention was not on Yu Qianzhou, but on the 2 people in purple in the sky. The smile on the Allure Beauty's face disappeared. She raised her hand and stroked her hair. A few experts in the tribulation passing from the pink cult also took a step forward and waited for the order. "I'm coming." Yu Qianzhou roared. The flying swords swirled like snow as he waved his hand. With a flick of his finger, the flying swords pledged their loyalty to him. Hundreds of streaks of black light split into 2 groups and charged towards Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan at lightning speed. Yu Qianzhou was throwing caution to the wind. It was impossible for him to let the first batch of brothers who followed him into battle be annihilated. Now that his cultivation had just broken through to the middle stage of nascent soul, his ability to control his flying sword had once again increased. He had to fight with his life on the line. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai had already noticed his movements. Seeing the flying swords flying towards them like rain, they instantly covered their bodies with protective stellar energy. The 2 of them were confident that with their cultivation, they could completely block Yu Qianzhou's attack. However, the two of them weren't completely at the mercy of the other party's attacks. One of them controlled the flying swords below to slaughter the masked rogue cultivators while the other struck out with a palm. The Daluo mountain-splitting palm of the Daluo sect instantly conjured two giant palm silhouettes to meet the two waves of sword rain. The flying sword was like a sharp arrow, and the palm shadow was like a bubble. When the two met, it was like a knife cutting through tofu. The palm energy was immediately broken by the flying sword. As expected, it could break through the stellar energy of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator. Yu Qianqiu was invigorated, and his confidence was greatly boosted. He then controlled the flying sword to rapidly shoot towards the two Daluo sect consecrators. The hundreds of black flying swords that were protecting him also carried him as he charged towards them. "Oh no, there's something strange about these swords," Cui Zhaofan cried out involuntarily. "They can break through stellar energy. Let's go." Li Mengbai's expression changed. The two of them shouted at the same time. In order not to affect their speed, they instantly retracted their stellar energy and soared into the sky. The two flying swords that had caused the masked rogue cultivators to suffer greatly also immediately flashed into the sky, chasing after their masters. Without the threat of the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, the masked rogue cultivators had suffered heavy casualties, and there were only about 400 of them left. However, their long battle experience in Utopia was very effective. They calmly and quickly formed a team to counterattack the Daluo sect. Yu Qianqiu pounced towards the spot where the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators had been standing. He looked down and saw that the number of casualties had reached a third. He instantly felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. These were all his efforts over the years. He couldn't help but roar crazily, "Kill! Kill! Kill! Don't leave a single one alive! Kill them all! You two old bastards, where do you think you're going? Give me your lives!" Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately turned bloodshot. He pointed at the two people flying into the sky and shouted. Then, thousands of black flying swords carried him into the sky and chased after the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators. The smell of desperation was very strong. When the masked rogue cultivators below saw that their leader had single-handedly defeated the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, they were instantly energized. They immediately followed their leader's orders to kill them all and started a frenzied massacre. There was no lack of intention to take revenge for their teammates. The various sects were shocked. Yu Qianqiu had actually scared away the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators from the Daluo sect. Now, he was flying into the sky alone to continue his pursuit. He was really crazy. Oh my. After this battle, if Yu Qianqiu was still alive, even if he didn't have the cultivation of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator, he would definitely be ranked among them. Not because of anything else, but because of his strength. After the people of supporting Immortal Island recovered from their shock, they looked at each other and shook their heads with bitter smiles. Now, they understood that supporting Immortal Island had abandoned a disciple with the potential to reach the late-stage tribulation stage. Moreover, he had killed two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators while he was only at the nascent soul stage. Although it was hard to believe, it was the truth. Supporting Immortal Island had suffered a heavy loss. Yu Qianqiu had used the improved Guiyuan sword art to establish his might in the cultivation world several times. Could it be that the tens of thousands of cultivators of supporting Immortal Island were inferior to Yu Qianqiu? The research and improvement of the Guiyuan sword art could not be delayed. The higher-ups of supporting Immortal Island nodded firmly. Bai Shan and the others from the four major clans were also surprised, but they weren't too surprised. The disciple of the world's #1 expert was not someone to be trifled with. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. The Allure Beauty looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding a sword and chasing after Yu Qianqiu, and her eyes lit up. She didn't expect such a scene to occur. This guy was really unfathomable and always exceeded her expectations. It seemed that her worries were unnecessary. Ze had no problem fighting Zhu Zhao alone. She believed that it wouldn't take long for her to succeed. However, Luo Kuan's participation immediately made Zhu Zhao feel better. It was also impossible for the two of them to defeat Ze. Putting aside the fact that Nong Zhu had trained her daughter, Nong Zhu's famous form displacement transposition technique in the cultivation world was not something that could be practiced for fun. Ze and Luo Kuan had a headache because Ze didn't fight them head-on. Relying on her strange body movement technique, she appeared and disappeared unpredictably. The two of them could only guard against her, and it was difficult for them to fight back effectively. Ze was originally worried about Yu Qianzhou's safety. At this time, when she saw Yu Qianzhou, a nascent soul stage cultivator, chasing after two cultivators at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, she was shocked and attributed all the credit to Bai Changchun. She admired Bai Changchun more and more. She thought that the disciple taught by Senior Bai was really extraordinary. Without any worries for the time being, Ze was immediately stimulated by Yu Qianzhou to the point that it was as if she had been injected with chicken blood. She used the great art of displacement transposition perfectly, immediately forcing Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao into an indescribably miserable state. The two of them had their backs against each other, and only then did they have one side of their defense reduced. Only then did they feel a little more relaxed. However, when they saw that Yu Qianzhou was also fighting 1 against 2, the two of them didn't know what to say. Zhu Zhao was so regretful that his intestines turned green. In order to stand up for his disappointing nephew, he had dragged the entire De Luo sect down with him. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai stopped high in the sky. With their cultivations, Yu Qianzhou naturally couldn't catch up. However, as the two of them were the highest echelons of the De Luo sect, they couldn't do that. If they really did that, the De Luo sect would be too ashamed to show their faces in public. Seeing that the two of them had stopped running and were preparing for battle, Yu Qianzhou also calmed down. He slowed down his speed and quickly set up his formation. Half of the flying swords were inserted outwards, densely distributed around his body, making him look like a hedgehog. He wasn't afraid of anything now, but he was afraid that the two cultivators at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage could use teleportation to ambush him. This ability to come and go without a trace was too terrifying. However, teleportation could only be used if there was space for them to move. Without the spatial crack that they used to teleport over, no matter how they tried to teleport, they would only be able to stop outside of his sword formation. After setting up his formation, Yu Qianzhou immediately felt more at ease. As long as he had a bit of buffer time, escaping would not be a problem. He immediately shouted, "Hand over your life." Yu Qianzhou commanded the remaining hundreds of flying swords to charge at the two of them. This guy kept asking the two of them to hand over their lives. The cultivators below were not deaf. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai's faces turned ashen. They were probably angry out of humiliation. Cui Zhaofan stared at the pursuing Yu Qianzhou and sneered, "You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If you want to die, don't blame me for being impolite." With a point of his finger, the flying sword that was floating beside him moved according to his heart's desire. It spun in the air and suddenly created an illusionary shadow of a sword intent. The entire sword seemed to have expanded by 12 times. With a whoosh, it pierced through the air. Its strong momentum caused visible ripples to form in the air as it charged straight at Yu Qianzhou. His attack when he was enraged was indeed extraordinary. Oh my! The final stage of the crossing calamity stage is indeed the final stage of the crossing calamity stage. Black fire flying sword, I will be relying on you to gain face. Don't let me down. Yu Qianzhou made up his mind and pointed his finger at the sky as well. He shouted, "Kill!" 100 black rays flashed out and twisted into a flood dragon that soared into the sky. It wanted to compete with the heavens. It soared into the sky and faced the huge flying sword that was creating a huge ripple. The various sects below raised their heads and squinted their eyes to watch. They were speechless. It was hard to tell if Cui Zhaofan's profound cultivation had the upper hand or if Yu Qianzhou's black flying sword was sharper. Li Mengbai looked over with a solemn expression. It was really strange that the flying sword could break through stellar qi. If there was an accident, He did not mind being the laughing stock of two cultivators at the end of the tribulation passing stage fighting against a nascent soul cultivator. The Deluo sect disciples below had almost all died. Only the tribulation passing stage cultivators were barely holding on. It seemed like they would not be able to hold on for much longer. None of the four of them could bear the crime of being completely wiped out. Moreover, Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao were also barely holding on. He raised his hand and the flying sword beside him landed in his hand. He then clenched it tightly. As soon as the gigantic flying sword collided with the dense black sword shadows, the dense black shadows immediately disappeared into the gigantic sword, making an ear-piercing "si" sound. Cui Zhaofan, who was mentally connected to his flying sword, had a change of expression. The huge sword was instantly shattered. It could no longer withstand such a huge force. With a loud bang, it exploded into pieces in the air. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.